Google, Microsoft, Facebook, Skype, Google Mail, Yahoo Mail, PayPal, these are all the same entity. They're all integrated. They get bought and sold and traded around. These are all U.S. Navy and military operations. Now, I know a physicist who told me that they were tracking people in the lab by the electromagnetic frequency emitted by individuals' DNA. In other words, every living thing is an antenna that transmits and receives. We're an electrical system, and the DNA in every living thing has a unique frequency and signal. That is what they're using, what they're focusing on, and what they're weaponizing to completely control us. The DNA Human Genome Project was carried out at the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, where I was a staff scientist for 5 years. But the Lawrence Livermore Lab, Los Alamos National Lab, these are all nuclear weapons labs, were also involved. That means the military, because the nuclear weapons labs exist for the Pentagon, and the Pentagon exists for the oil companies. So, the Human Genome Project was set up and well-funded to experiment and to research and to describe the human genome. Well, what we know about Google is that they are doing DNA surveys from space. This would be NASA and the Navy. NASA is run by the Navy. They have been tracking and identifying isolated populations, for instance, in the Amazon, who have never had contact with Western people. These are villages of isolated people who are still living their traditional hunter-gatherer lives. They are also doing a global species survey, and I've been tracking this for 2 years and noticed that many new species are being discovered, and it seems to be on a grid system. So they're doing a survey from space. They went down the west coast of South America and then came up the east coast, and now they're in Southeast Asia. And if you watch in the news, about once a week they come up with a new article and photos on new species they've discovered. This is part of the United Nations Agenda 21 program, which is to identify all species and to do a complete global inventory of humans and animals. What David Rockefeller has said about Agenda 21 is that in the end, we're going to have a chip on every person, and they will only be allowed to take out of the system what they put into it. If you work 12 hours a day, you're allowed to take 12 hours of something of value out of the system, but nothing more. The J. Craig Venter Institute has their mission as, quote, to forge new life forms, unquote. And they are also involved in manipulated computer code on DNA. What does this mean? Well, Dr. Helen Wallace from GeneWatch in 2002 said, we are in great danger, and she described this as a massive DNA database by the back door. And what they're doing is using computing, medicine, technology, and the police state to converge into basically what is creating a totalitarian scientific oligarchy. And their purpose is to get this information and use it in discriminatory programs where the rich benefit and the poor are impacted negatively by these programs. And the second part of that agenda is the depopulation initiatives. Now, I did an interview with Dr. Wynne Parker. So on the air, I was talking about depleted uranium and the tremendous affinity it has for the DNA and mitochondria, because uranium and phosphate structures, they have a love affair all through the universe. And that means that when people are exposed to uranium particles from these wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and Yugoslavia, and by the way, it's over here in 2 weeks, it sticks to our DNA and our mitochondria that provide all the energy for the body. So as I was sitting there describing all of this to Dr. Parker, and I was talking about HAARP, this is all integrated into the HAARP system, I knew that Dr. Parker, Wynne Parker, was not his real name. I knew he was a CIA scientist. I knew he'd worked for the U.S. government, for the Department of Defense, for the World Health Organization, and the UN at different times. And I knew that he was a microbiologist who knew the whole field because he had to advise the government. And so I just said, Dr. Parker, what is the application of this discovery that nanoparticles are transmitters? And he caught his breath and he said, well, it's to redesign the human genome. Create anything they want to. Right. It's to repeat anything they want to. It's this totalitarian, insane scientific oligarchy that's run by psychopaths, and they think they can do anything they want to. Now, what is transmitting and receiving that's around us? Well, how about cell phones in the megahertz frequency band? These are some abstracts that I'm going to just read the titles of. This is 1996. Single and double-strand DNA breaks in rat brain cells after acute exposure to radio frequency electromagnetic radiation. So they're talking about sterility, about cancer, and about altering people's behavior. And the airport scanners are doing the same thing. It's very simple to do because we are electrical systems and we transmit and receive just like any other antenna. A lot of this was described in the 1930s in the lectures that Bertrand Russell gave at Oxford University. And I would like to read a paragraph. A totalitarian government with a scientific bent might do things that to us would seem horrifying. The Nazis were more scientific than the present rulers of Russia and were more inclined to the atrocities that I have in mind. If they had survived, they would probably have soon taken to scientific breeding. Any nation which adopts this practice will, within a generation, secure great military advantages. The system, one may surmise, will be something like this, except possibly in the governing aristocracy. All but 5% of males and 30% of females will be sterilized. The 30% of females will be expected to spend the years from 18 to 40 in reproduction in order to secure adequate cannon fodder. As a rule, artificial insemination will be preferred to the natural method. The unsterilized, if they desire the pleasures of love, will usually have to seek them with sterilized partners. In other words, Bertrand Russell's wild reproduction is no longer an option. So basically, they have unlimited budgets. They have an unlimited scientific body in universities to do all this research. And today, 50% of scientific research money in universities comes from the Pentagon.